This time around, we're looking at Google Search Console. Before I get into the nuts and bolts of it, this will be aimed at people who've either got no experience of Google Search Console or who've got access to it, but they're not quite sure what they're looking at. As you'll see in a moment, there are lots of nooks and crannies for Google Search Console, and we won't have time to get all of them today because we'll only be online for about half an hour, well, 25 minutes now. So if you come up with any questions, or if you think of anything later on, or if you see the recording and you think of a question and we need to drill into specific areas, then we can certainly do another version, a more advanced version of these in a couple of weeks or so time. And that's always a good thing, actually, because, and we'll touch upon this later, Google Search Console evolves all of the time. As Google evolve, they end up evolving what is in Google Search Console. And we'll get into that in a moment. So that's what we're covering today, Google Search Console. Now, if you haven't heard of it before, you more than likely have heard of Google Analytics. And Google Search Console is kind of like a distant cousin to Google Analytics. There is a slight overlap, but they come at it from different perspectives. Analytics is very much about monitoring how people use your website, what pages they visit, where they've come from, social media, clicking links, where they've come from in the world. Are they in America, North America? How much time are they spending on the website? What devices are they using? Yada, yada, yada. So it's very much about how users are interacting with your website. Google Search Console contains some similar stats, but it comes at it from a different perspective. And to really understand that, we've got to take one step back and understand how Google works. Google's a search engine. People come along, they type in a query, Google thinks, and it comes back with a list of pages who they think best match those queries. Now, for it to understand how to do that mapping, that matching, it needs to analyze websites. And the analyzing of websites is where they look at all the pages and they look at all the code, looking to understand the meaning of the website. Now, this is generally called spidering. You might hear it as crawling, but the reality is computer programs which they've written will ingest as much of the websites as they can and understand, based on lots and lots of factors, lots of changing factors, second guessing what they think the website is all about, which is then why they're then able to try and match it to certain queries. So, and this touches very much upon SEO, because SEO is all about, well, how do we second guess what Google think is important? Well, one of the big tools we use for that is Google Search Console, because the console gives us a very clear indication of how happy Google are with the website and how they are indexing it and if there are any issues. So it's very much more of a low-level tool about how Google is crawling your website. Whereas Analytics is looking at users' interaction, Google Search Console touches upon some of those elements, but it's much more low-level. Now, if you ever heard of Google Webmaster Tools, that was the old name for Google Search Console. It used to be GWT, Google Webmaster Tools, a couple of years ago. For whatever reason, they changed it to Google Search Console. Maybe was that about a couple of years ago, yeah? And in that time, Google Console has changed drastically. It's got a whole new interface. And as I mentioned earlier, they add new sections to it all the time. They added one section only about a month or so ago. And we'll take a look at that in a moment. So why don't we go over and look at Google Search Console and see what we can see. Let's change the old scene here. Right, okay, you should see me in the bottom left. Yeah, I think I'm there. If I'm looking down at the screen, I'm sorry. Not quite at the same level. Firstly, if you don't have access to GSC, you do want to get it set up. So how do you find it? That's for something else. That's a good article, actually. I might drop that in to the links later on. Google Search Console. There we are. That's how you find it. Start now. And if you've not registered your site with them before, you're going to want to, somewhere here, you'll find the Add Property button. There's two ways of adding it. I'll ignore the first one because that means you've got to do some DNS changes, which is a bit of a faff for some people. It's a better method. because it solves a few little problems. But the easiest method might just be to put the URL in it. Now, if you've already got Google Analytics access, putting in the URL of your website here should just work a treat. I think the only gotcha I'd mention there is that be careful your website isn't working on HTTP and HTTPS. Ideally, it should only be working on HTTPS now. But if you do it incorrectly, you could accidentally look at the non-secure version of Google Search Console, and it won't give you the full data. So ultimately, here where you see me typing, oh, can I do a zoom in? Yeah, look at that, cool. Make sure you use the HTTPS one. That URL prefix method just means you haven't got to faff around with your DNS, although that is possible. Okay, once you've verified and you've got access, you're into the reports. Happy days. The overview page, we'll come back to performance in a minute. I think a killer aspect for you to be looking at immediately is, now, are there any errors here? Because there we see an immediate golden opportunity to get rid of any errors. The more errors we get rid of, the healthier we make the website, the happier we make Google. Google don't want to rank problematic websites. So let's go into this race with our best foot forward. So as you can probably see here, we keep a close eye on their errors on our website. There's none there apart from in videos where it's saying there's 6. So if you see errors, what do you do to find out more information? If I click into here, I can see it's saying error, missing field thumbnail URL, error, missing field name, description, upload date. Okay, so this is what we call metadata. Metadata is information about information. So it's not good enough sometimes just to upload a video. Ideally, we'd be uploading a transcript as well, so that people who can't see or have visual problems, they could access a transcript instead. But that's only one set of metadata. There are other things like the thumbnail URL, which I suppose is what you show in a page instead of the whole video, the name, the description. So if we added those in, and we probably would, because I'm guessing some of these videos are from our webinars, whatever. And ultimately we want to sort these out. So what we would do, we would look at this information. I'm lucky because I'll get one of the guys from the team to look at it. We would put fixes in place, and then we would keep an eye on what Google is saying here. And hopefully what we are seeing is, and you can see there's a calendar here, yeah? So hopefully some days after we put that fix in, that should then drop off and we fix that error. So if we go back to overview, you can see there's a menu on the left-hand side. Big thing you want to keep an eye on is the errors. We'll come back to performance. Well, go on, let's have a quick look at performance. I hesitated then because you can get some of this information from Google Analytics really, but if I click on performance, you could do a whole session on this because this is really quite powerful. But if I just say edit this is my data, my company's data actually. If I do for the last 12 months, we can see those kind of global trends or whatever. Oh, interesting as well. Again, I mentioned you can get this kind of data from Google Analytics, so that's why I wasn't going to spend too much time on it. But do notice we get a lot more of that search query data there, which we did used to get in Google Analytics, but ever since the switch to SSL really and a few other issues, that data is no longer available. So that's certainly one thing you can keep an eye on, are those kind of query terms. Do your button need a, well, that's not even good grammar, but actually it's not mine. That's the query, of course. But I wrote a good blog article on whether websites need a home button, and that always seems to get quite a bit of traffic. This is quite useful as well. This is the URL inspection tool, and it opens up at the very top. Now this is interesting because this post I wrote this morning. And you can see it says the URL is on Google. All these green ticks means Google knows about it. But I only published it this morning. And in fact, I tested this about an hour or so after I published. And I could see Google had picked it up without me having to do anything. So that shows that Google is constantly looking for changes, and you might wonder, how do they notice that it changed? Well, we'll get to that in a moment. Sometimes I have, sometimes if I want to tell Google straight away that I've published a new page without waiting for them to find out, you can put that in there, and you wouldn't get these grey ticks. And then there would be, there would be a button here to say request indexing. So you can do it that way as well. Good. Oh, there's request indexing. Yes, certainly if the page has changed. Okay. Coverage. What can we look at here? Again, what shouts out here are errors. And again, we get a good view over time of when errors occur. So if we look down here, I don't know if I might need to zoom in, I can see there's no errors there. Server 5XX, yeah, so that'll be a server error itself. No website, well, the server is the computer running and delivering your website. None of that technology is infallible. If anything goes offline for a small period of time, what you get are what's called 500 codes coming back, which is a server error. Can't speak. You probably heard of another server code, which is 404. That means not found. But the 500 codes are when there's a serious error. Now, if Google are trying to index or crawl your website during a tiny outage, then it's going to flag up those errors. Now, they tend to be transient and they would tend to go away. I wouldn't normally pay much attention to those. If you see lots of them, that might mean there's an issue with your hosting, and you might want to speak to your hosting company. And if you're not, you probably want to put something in place like Uptime Robot. As you see here, the world's leading uptime monitoring service, 5-minute checks. So you can get a lot of online checking for your website server. And this is a much more granular, fine tooth comb to keep an eye on the performance and uptime of your server. Because if you're seeing a lot of outages, well, you'll end up seeing issues in Google Search Console. And we want to eradicate those because, again, Google don't necessarily want to surface websites which are problematic. If it's going to throw 500 errors, well, what confidence have Google got that they can serve that page and it's going to be okay? So yeah, the raw hosting of your website and the health of it is very, very important. So if you're seeing any errors here, like here, we've got submitted URL as crawl issue, right? It's telling me what the URL is, and I could go in and I could find it and fix it. Notice as well here, yeah? Done fixing, validate fix. Oh yeah, so one thing I'm not saying here, once you've signed up and verified for Google Search Console, it should automatically email you if anything untoward happens, like a new error crops up. So we see it all the time. Invariably for minor things, for some of the clients that we monitor, especially this new thing they're measuring. I'll get to that in a moment. But if you get an email through which says there's an issue, you can log into Google Search Console, find out what it's talking about, and either you or one of your team or support company, like myself, we can fix it, and then we can validate the fix, which then tells Google immediately to go away and have another little think about that. Then we can come back the next day and we can see if that's fixed, which is really, really good when you think about it. You're not just guessing in the wild. We're not randomly putting changes on the website in the hope that it'll fix these things. We've got a feedback loop here, which is really important to try and improve the long-term health of your website. We can see the number of valid pages that we've got. Again, errors, I think, would be the focus of today's talk, really. Any questions come in? No, that's fine. Right, sitemaps. This is interesting when I looked at this earlier. Who can spot the deliberate mistake? The issue is that we've actually got the sitemap in there twice. Now, this is an interesting little question, really, because you might think, oh, no, hang on, let's go back a little bit. What is the sitemap? Sitemaps.xml. Let's have a look at that, guys. That's a good idea. Let's have a little look at it. Sitemap.xml is a machine-readable view of all the pages and content on your website. Look at that. That's not showing anything. That's interesting, isn't it? What have I done wrong there? Let's try that again. Right, okay, that's a bit better. I'm interested why the other one didn't work, because it seems to be working now. Yeah, so this is a machine-readable view of all the content on your website. Now, in reality, even though we say sitemap.xml, it tends to be a family of sitemaps, because you can see here, we've got one for your posts. I better zoom in. We've got one for posts, one for pages. We've got one for any custom post types you've got. Like we've got a custom post type for webinars, so there's one for that. So if I clicked into the webinar one, there's all our different webinar URLs. Now, WordPress automatically creates these sitemaps. So that's why, if I click on posts, yeah, oh, it's not in order, is it? Oh yeah, it is. It's at the bottom. Do you see at the very bottom? I better zoom in, sorry. That's the post which Google automatically picked up this morning, because it gets notified via the sitemap. So that's an easy way for it to tell. So going back to the original point, sitemaps, we've accidentally got the sitemap in there twice. Now, Google aren't daft. They realize that, oh, look, you might immediately think, oh, there's a duplicate content issue. No, it's fine. Google aren't daft. They realize that the sitemap is referring to the same URLs, so it can just remove it. It can ignore one of them. And I should be able to delete that sitemap, and I'll do that now, which then should just leave the main one. Great. Side note, you don't have to have a sitemap to let Google know about your pages, but again, the better and the cleaner that we can integrate with Google, the better for SEO and for reporting, really, which is, there's a very clear and obvious sitemap section in Google Search Console, so let's use it. Removals. Here's a fairly interesting one. If Google have got something in their index from your website which you don't want there, your immediate reaction is just to delete the page. But of course, that doesn't remove it from Google's index, that just deletes it. If you just delete a page which Google know about, what happens when people click on the link? It 404s. So what you need to do is to tell Google to actually remove it from their index. Now, I don't know if you can if I zoom in, but you can see here, I've submitted requests to have certain URLs removed. Just a bit of tidying up, really, because you can see some of these are thank you pages. And, these are transactional pages. I don't see any, I suppose there's not a major harm with them being indexed, but I don't know, it felt untidy to have them there. So if I went to Google now and did a search on thank you, those removed pages aren't there. I can see some new ones are. There's a thank you page for, that's the contact page, thank you. If I zoom in, and there's a subscribe, thank you. So I could use Google Search Console to remove those from the index. And there is something you can do in Yoast to help with that as well. This isn't a section I would expect you to have to mess around with a lot, mind. Okay. Let's just zoom on a little bit. I'm mindful of the time. I don't want to go on too long after past. Enhancements is very interesting. Core Web Vitals is a new addition. That's what was added, I'd say about a month ago. It might be slightly longer, but it certainly wasn't very long ago. Core Web Vitals, now I've got a blog post about this, and I'll drop that in as well. But this is a new way that Google have with measuring one of their metrics about measuring the performance of your website. And this is very much about how user interfaces work. And I've got an example of one of the points which they're trying to pick up here. It's like in the great tradition of Blue Peter, there's a video I made earlier. Now this might play straight away when I switch over. Let's have a look if it works.
So if I show you this, so I've gone to this website now, as happens a lot.
Pause it a sec. So I've done a screencast here of something I saw on my mobile phone, and I want to show it to you. I don't know if you can zoom in anymore, but what you're seeing here is a mobile website. There is the app notification you get sometimes on iPhone. That's not really the point I'm making here, but if you just bear with me a second. So notice we're on the mobile view of the website, yeah?
OS, it's coming up with the app notification on the top, whether you want it or not. Then if I try and scroll, oh, what happens there? It's jolted. And again, on mobile, what happens a lot is that as you scroll down a little bit, the menu on the top minimizes, which is fine. But notice how everything just jolts, and from a user perspective, you've got no idea where you are. So I'm scrolling down, and now, see, open, if you, yeah, look at the bottom of the screen, open until 12. Keep on scrolling down, and that's completely jolted to the top. So,
right, so I'll pause up there. Hopefully you got the gist of what was going on there. Something in that mobile experience was very, very disjointing. And now you might think that's a minor point and people can get away with it. But Google are a big data company, and they can probably easily spot that websites which have issues like that have big problems with either people bouncing off it or converting. So they know that harms user experience. And they've probably known about that for a while, and they've boiled that into something now they call Core Web Vitals. Core Web Vitals deals with a few other subjects, but this is one key element about jolting and confusing user interfaces. This probably does have significance for WordPress, because WordPress, for all its positives, it's got lots of off-the-shelf themes and off-the-shelf plugins, and we throw all these things together, and maybe we'll drop in something like opt-in mods to show a banner at the top or a cookie banner at the bottom. That's a recipe for creating these kind of conditions, which can cause issues. So again, like with anything with Google Search Console, anything which is complaining about, we want to stay on top of. So poor URLs, none. URLs that need improvement. Oh, maybe I'll zoom in a bit in case you can't see that. So here's the report for Google for Core Web Vitals. Again, it's something you want to keep a close eye on. I'll post a link into the blog post I did so you understand it a bit better. But I think your general view on a lot of these things is there anything in red there? And when there's nothing in red, move on to the areas which need improvement. Carry on going through the enhancements. Again, I'm not seeing any issues here. No errors. Great. If you are, look at it. AMP. Oh yeah, this is a good point. You may or may not see all the things that I've got listed here, and you'll understand why it's different in a moment. AMP are Google's accelerated mobile pages. I might write a blog post on this, because AMP really came into play when responsive websites weren't very responsive. And I'm interested now whether it's still the best practice, or to allow the websites themselves to function without AMP. So irrespective of whether AMP's a good thing or bad thing, if we click on it and we see errors, again, these are the things which you want to go in, get fixed, validate on here, see if that solves it. Trying to get a clean bill of health here on Google Search Console. Now the rest are quite interesting. Again, I'll zoom in a bit. I've got, you see here, events, FAQ, site links, search box, what's that, disease? Search box and videos. Right, this is quite cool. How do I best explain this? This is what Google, and the terms overlap slightly a bit. This is kind of what Google either call enhancements or structured data or Google rich snippets. Let's say it another way, right? Let's look at it another way. Let's go to ye olde Glass Mountain's website. Let's go to webinars. Now our webinars are custom code. We've got what I call a summary page of all the upcoming webinars. There's today's, there's the Friday the 18th, and it was the 18th, yeah, good. And so there's one on the 4th of October that'll be coming up as well. Click on one of these and you see all the details, yeah? So you can just code that, and we did. But Google don't necessarily know that's an event. They might guess it is. They might see lots of words and context on it. They might see things like the fact that it's got a date. They might use that as good signals that it's an event. But we can use some structured data, which are some hidden fields which go behind the scenes, which explicitly tell Google this is an event, and Google can then do other things with it. Because Google can take structured data and they can raise its visibility within the search engines. But they can't do that unless they know what the data is. And if there's ever an opportunity to stop Google having to guess, then let's make use of it. So here you can see we've got events. Now, as it is, it's not picking up our events, so we've got a little bit of a bug there, but that's cool. This is the whole point of Google Search Console. It's to spot where we've got issues and to drill into it, because really we've got, I wonder how it works. We've certainly got at least 2 upcoming events, so they should be on there. I wonder if it would show the ones in the past as well, because they're still live on the website. So there's an issue there. We need to look at it. There is also an FAQ type of structured markup. What's the best way to show you this? Let's have a little look. Yeah, I think I'll do this. First off, let's have a look at what is out there in terms of structured data. Let me see if I can find what I'm after. Yeah, explore the search gallery. I think this is it. So we've got structured data for articles. Articles should already be built into WordPress, certainly on the blog side. In fact, let's have a little look. Let's see if I'm right. Going a bit slow. Let's see if it works. Let's try and view the source of this page. Article. You can see the article is showing up there right at the very top. What else we got? Yeah, so we got books, breadcrumb, carousel, images swimming around. Oh yeah, so on the right hand side here, it shows how this structured data can appear in Google. I say can because it's up to Google how they present the data. All we can do is to structure our information in as best way as possible. It's up to Google what they do with it. But if we can minimize the amount of work Google's got to do with looking at our website in terms of get rid of the errors and put in the structured data which makes sense to our data, then we're doing as good as we can, yeah? So we can see we've got breadcrumbs, carousels, courses, critic review, data set, events, that's what we're doing for webinars, fact checking, FAQs, we mentioned that one. So you could, I'll drop this link in as well, you could have a look at that and see how that applies to your website. Good news is for you that many WordPress plugins will make use of this already. I think I mentioned earlier that the webinar section on our website, that was hand coded by us because of specific reasons. But if you won't have that ability, you might need to use a plugin. But plugins like Event Calendar Pro, which is the one we tend to use when the client needs a plugin for this, I think that can handle the structured data for you. And a lot of the other plugins, if there's an opportunity for them to automatically drop in the structured data, it should appear. And once you've got that structured data, you should then start to see the relevant elements appear here. Like we've just done some work for a client who does a lot of image photography on his website. There are a few opportunities to make something appear here. So that will be interesting to see what appears there. And then when it appears, we want to click on it and we want to see if there's any issues. And here, there's no issues. It's valid, which is great. So I think there's a great opportunity there to see what's available for you and to get that indexing. And I think that's really, let's have a look what else we can see here. Manual actions, again, you're looking for those nice green ticks, which show you there's no issues, okay? Security issues, again, are we seeing any issues there? And you see here legacy tools and reports. I wouldn't worry about that too much. It is legacy stuff. Most of what we're interested in is up here. And so that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today, guys. I just wanted to give you a feel for what Google Search Console is about and to dip our toes into the water of how you can start using it to start improving how Google perceive your website, which can only help in terms of SEO, etc. Right, I've got a few links to drop in after the show. What have we got to say next? Yeah, don't forget, we got the legal one show coming up on the 18th. And keep an eye out for the old WordPress Power Academy. And that's it, guys. Where are we now? We've been on for about just over half an hour. I think that'll do. Thank you for tuning in, and hopefully see you in the chat or for the next live event.